You're welcome back to part 2 of Davis. The central question in this programme is, how do we protect our children against child sexual abuse? We're also looking at the system, the judicial system. What happens when a victim goes into that system? As we said, a child is not empowered to speak out about their distress and confusion. But a young adult can, and one did. Lavinia Kerwick, you're welcome. 3 years ago, you spoke out in protest against the sentence passed on the man who raped you. Why?
Because the system wasn't there for me. I was angry with the system, and I just wanted to paint him black and to know that he wouldn't get away with it in the long run. I was very hurt with the fact that he walked out of court with a 10-year suspended sentence, and that was it. I was just very angry.
Have you any regrets subsequently about going public?
Privately, sometimes on occasion I do get a lot of abuse, and people point and stare and that, but where I live, people have taken it in, and a lot of them are very proud that I stood up and said, no, this is not good enough, because we want more from our system. I mean, I gave my case to a judge, and I hoped he would do the right thing, and he didn't, so I was very angry, and I needed to tell people that I was angry, and I needed to have some sort of explanation, that someone would tell me that I did the right thing.
Did you have any sense that because the man who raped you walked away with a non-custodial sentence, that you had been in some way devalued?
Well, when I came out of court the first time and I heard the suspended sentence, I thought it was all my fault, and why me? Did the judge have a bad day? And then I subsequently learned that this goes on. It's gone on, and it will continue to go on.
I know that each case in its own way is unique, but how did that violent abuse, that rape, how has that affected you over the last 3 years since?
Well, at the beginning I didn't want to accept it. I was very embarrassed and I felt very guilty, and I wondered, was it all my fault? And then I developed an eating disorder, anorexia, and I went very much downhill, and I was very afraid that he might come and do something to me, because he had said that he would kill me if I said anything to anybody. So it affected me mentally and physically. I was very, very weak for a long, long time.
I'm asking you now to perhaps prefer some advice to other people who are in the same position as yourself, but particularly perhaps those even younger and even more vulnerable than you were. What advice would you give them? Having gone through the system, would you still say, come forward, report this, go the distance with it?
For very young children, I would say find someone that believes you, because when you have one person that believes you, then it won't be as hard. And just that one person who'll stay with you through the rest of your life and through this experience. Like my mum stayed with me, and she was the first person I told, and she believed me. You need someone to believe you and to say, you're right, report this. Something has to be done. It's wrong to happen.
All right. Rosemary Liddy from the Rape Crisis Centre. Where's Rosemary? You've doubtless heard very similar accounts many times.
Yes, hundreds of times. And I mean, right to this day, very, very few women who are raped have actually the courage to go to court. Under 6% of the people who come to us would go to court.
Well, we asked Lavinia to join us really to speak on behalf of the victims.
Yes.
And those who have been the victim of that kind of violent abuse. We concentrate today on children who are in that position. From your own experience, how hard is it for a child, first of all, to be believed?
I would think it's virtually impossible, really. And I'm very conscious here, we keep on talking about, we have to empower children to come forward, and we must get children to say no. And the reality is that it's the adults in this country who need to be re-educated. We're not listening to our children. We don't value our children. And we're putting the kind of onus on them to come forward. Adult survivors of child sexual abuse have a vast amount to teach us. I mean, their lives have been devastated, many of them. And they're able to talk about that and tell us. They've talked about trying to tell.
It took even with respect to her, a fairly hard-boiled egg, Germaine Greer. It took her 30 years or more to come forward to talk about a teenage rape.
Yeah, and they're not even believed now. And I mean, a lot of the adult survivors will laugh at the idea of children going and finding someone who believes them. They say they're not believed now and they're adults.
All right. Then taking the woman at the very back first.
Okay, I'd just like to agree with some of the things that have been saying and applaud Lavinia for the courage that she has in coming forward. I think what we're talking about here is not just an increase in resources and training, but a fundamental shift in the attitude we have to children in this society. The onus shouldn't be on children to come forward. Adults need to make that atmosphere conducive and helpful for children to make a point themselves.
All right, the lady in front of you.
Derek, we also have the problem that many children now do speak up, but either they're not listened to and believed, or in fact they are believed, the statements are taken, and the DPP, for some reason known to himself only, or his office, drops the case, and those children feel valueless.
All right, can I bring in a barrister at this stage, Mary Ellen Ring, because it strikes me that there appears to be, in many instances, a great deal of difficulty in securing a conviction, first of all. And secondly, that there are conflicting arguments as to whether or not cases involving child abuse should be publicised at all.
Well, cases involving children, be they victims or be they there as an accused person of a crime, the law has always protected them. They have, even as an accused person, had the right to have their name withheld. And so, in fairness to the law has said these are young people. They are persons perhaps with futures in front of them, and they should be protected by the courts in that regard. The problem that has arisen in the quite right pursuit of protection of a child has been the fact that the attendant publicity, the attendant awareness that could come from a case quite often has been affected. And clearly, for instance, in family cases where you don't have the reporting of what goes on in a family case in the newspapers, like you have in other cases, there are people who believe there is no marital breakdown, there are no problems within families because they don't read about it in the paper.
This would appear to be the Clodagh Corcoran situation, where the research suddenly turned up information which should have been available to anybody reading the court reports. But that 1908 Act, which has been quoted recently, effectively inhibits almost any kind of reporting.
Weighted in favour of the abuser, because the people who devised the 1908 section on incest said they had to be very careful not to tarnish a good man's name.
All right.
That was the words they used.
Man behind you.
Yes, I just wanted to, in fact, make the point we've been talking about prevention and the need to educate children, and just to pick up on what some people have said. I work as a community care social worker, and there would be a high degree of frustration amongst my colleagues that there aren't enough of them and that they're not actually able to deliver the type of child protection service that they wish. And very often what happens in a broader sense is that we get into these debates about reactive versus prevention. And I just want to make the point that whilst it's perfectly appropriate to think in terms of prevention, we need to remember that there are hundreds of children right now who are being abused and who need urgent therapeutic services.
All right, but I mean, Clodagh mentioned the business of we don't want to tarnish a good man's name. That would strike me as a fairly honourable aspiration, when it also begs the question, how expert are the experts who are charged with monitoring, detecting and prosecuting child sex abuse? Now, Edward Hernan, who is at the back of our audience today, was a wrongfully accused parent.
I was accused of incest in 1986. It took me 3 years to get into a court of law. I asked for the Gardaí to be involved. They would not involve the Gardaí. I was denied the right to a second opinion. I was denied the right to the evidence against me. 9 years down the line, I still have not seen that evidence. I'm in the process now of going in. I have to go to a high court of law to force these people to show me the evidence and my legal representatives. We have no rights. Our children have no rights.
Can I bring in the man beside you?
Yeah, indeed. Somebody over there said adult survivors have a lot to teach us, and I concur with that. And I take it back to what Clodagh Corcoran said at the beginning, referring to the ISPCC study of last year, the ISPCC IMS study. Now, so far, everybody has equated child sexual abuse with incest, and of course they are two different things. In the ISPCC study, And there were quite a number of people in it who said they had been sexually abused. Not one of them said they were sexually abused by their father. One of them said they were sexually abused by a stepfather. That's out of 120 odd people. Now, that is what's called a prevalence study, where you interview a random sample of adults and say, were you sexually abused as a child, and if so, by who?
Basically to find out who the most likely abusers are.
In other words, what I'm getting at is there's a huge discrepancy between the prevalence study and the incidence figures which come from the health board's figures of interaction.
All right, well,
can I follow that through? I'm not quite finished, because the same discrepancy occurs between prevalence and incidence figures in the UK and in the US.
All right, well, let me bring in the ISPCC.
Could I just change the focus a slight bit and say that there's always going to be situations where difficulties arise and people will be wrongly accused, but in the majority of cases, the system militates against children. Children are the victims, and if we look at if we look at the system, we will see that it's not designed to be conducive to children telling, and it victimises children.
Hold on a second. This is chilling for any parent watching this programme. And they say, yes, they're very concerned about the welfare of their children, but suddenly there's this chilling prospect that they could be wrongfully accused of interfering with their children.
Let's look at the basis on which you can be convicted of a child sexual abuse offence in the criminal courts. They are three. One, you are witnessed by an adult committing the offence. Two, you admit the offence. Or three, that an adult retrospectively accuses another adult. That's the reality. It is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to occasion a criminal conviction in this country.
It took him 3 years to clear his name.
It took me 3 years, and it's taken me another 6 years on top of that. Now, Mr. O'Tiernig is one man who said in 1993 that there were parents being falsely accused, and there was a mini scandal on a mini Cleveland scandal here in Ireland. And Mr. O'Tiernig cannot deny that, and it's in the papers.
Senator Joe Turligan.
I'm one of these people in the middle on this area, because representing teachers who are themselves liable to be subject to allegations and who are also caring for children.
And have had false accusations made against them.
And I would say that there is a balance here, that what has been said about children is absolutely right. But the fact of the matter is, even though what Keane says about somebody being found guilty is correct legally, the reality is that if an allegation is made and left hanging there, and it isn't being dealt with and processed properly, that also causes a problem. And we do need a processing... No, I'm not disagreeing with you, but we do need a processing way to deal with allegations very quickly and very efficiently and effectively.
Can I bring in our barrister?
Balance between the carers and also the children's welfare.
All right, I want to talk to Mary Ellen Ring again on that.
Senator Joe O'Toole has used a very important word, and that's balancing. And what has to be done now, and what hasn't been done, it hasn't been done in our legislation, it hasn't been done in our constitution, and it hasn't been done in our own minds, is to balance the rights that children have as persons, balance those rights with the rights as members of families, and to take that into consideration, and then balance their rights as members of society. They are not people who belong to people, be they teachers, parents, or any other adult. And it's a difficult process for us all to learn how to do.
All right, Liddy in the middle row.
I'd just like to say a word about, on behalf of those with disability, and there many of the difficulties are even more compounded because, for example, the Stay Safe is based on you run and you tell and you shout. And for many of my clients, they wouldn't be able to run or tell or shout. And indeed, the feeling is something nobody'd ever harm a disabled person, and that is not true.
That they are particularly at risk?
Yes.
All right.
I couldn't agree more than with the point that Mary Ellen Ring has made about the view that we have of children. And all of this, I think, is a symptom of resources going into catching perpetrators and getting convictions and getting evidence from children, rather than the concentration of resources on a helpful way to children and on treatment for those who have been the perpetrators as well as the victims. I think it's a very important point to make.
While sympathising with people who have been wrongfully accused, and I mean that is an appalling thing to happen to anybody, at the moment the balance of rights is weighed against children. That there are innumerably more children who haven't had appalling situations reported.
And one of the things I think we really need to look at is what is happening in schools, because it's a different mechanism we've never had before, so that parents and teachers working together raise awareness amongst themselves and amongst children. It gives children somewhere safe to go and report. There's a mechanism within the schools the teachers are operating that has that reported to the right place at the right time. And I think we also have to look at
the Kilkenny incest report.
No, I want to take in the man at the back in the beard there.
It does seem from the discussion that trying to deal with the issues simply in a legal framework, while that's helpful, it doesn't go all the way, that it is a question of awareness. It's a question of a cultural shift, I think, also, in the direction of which was being talked about there shortly ago, about just learning to listen to children themselves and not necessarily being thrown back on the law all the time. I think that's important.
All right.
The point I wanted to make was the point about children having a safe place to go, i.e. the school. And we talked about, or earlier there was reference to children who are homeless. There's a growing number of children who are schoolless, where schools will not accept them. They will not enrol them, particularly at post-primary level. And that's becoming a big problem, particularly in the rural area, or not the rural, the urban areas, where you cannot get a place for your child.
All right, let me take in the lady beside you.
As someone who works with adults who have been sexually abused, I actually agree that the adults have a lot to tell us, and we're not actually listening to them, because the focus is on children at the moment, which I absolutely agree with, and preventative stuff, and the schools and the whole lot. But I still think that what is coming from the adults are absolute memories and, you know, reliving the situation, and they are very adamant that these things have happened, and they are going to the trouble, having buried it, not necessarily memory-wise, but buried it in themselves for years, that they are actually now coming to do something about it.
In the last few minutes of the programme, can we concentrate perhaps on suggested frameworks for prevention, detection, deterrence? I mean, what should be put in place?
I think it's very important that we state tonight that there needs to be a preventive strategy designed by the Department of Health in this country.
And there isn't one.
There is not one, and I think that's appalling given the number of reports, etc., that have been produced showing the extent of this problem.
I think this is too important to let into the hands of the Department of Health. I mean, I'm really serious about that.
Sure, and I would agree.
They've had enough time, they have the evidence, they don't give a damn about the children of this country.
The preventive strategy should have four key bits. It should involve information giving. It should involve media campaigns to heighten awareness. It should be in the schools and in the home. And it also needs to produce direct access services for children where they can be empowered to tell about their experience.
But the key thing from this programme is that programme does not exist.
And mandatory reporting
hold on
those issues.
Mandatory reporting over there.
Mandatory reporting to the Gardaí. I think it's highly unfair to blame the health board. I think there are a large number of people working in the health board services who are equally frustrated as the people in the audience here. I do think the Department of Health have the primary role, and I think we should be working with them to develop that role. I don't think we should say...
We've worked with
them for 10 years. Man beside you.
There truly must be a very coherent approach to this, which involves both government departments and those working in voluntary organisations and teachers and other health professionals. And I think it's terribly important that there is greater awareness, there's more information, there's more understanding, and there's more planning and resourcing of services.
All right.
The thing I think we're missing all the time is we have to work with offenders. We must have rehabilitation for offenders, because that's where it stops. It's not with the victims, it's not with the children, it's actually with the offenders.
It has been put to me, can I actually go back to some of the people with psychological training here? It has been put to us in the course of this research. Some experts say you cannot rehabilitate a paedophile.
That's not true. That's not true.
That's a cop-out.
But you need to use, you must have the full cooperation of the law when you're doing that.
Absolutely.
It's the fact that sex offenders are not self-motivating. You need to give them very clear choices. And the point that I just wanted to make, and it's in fact to pick up on this man's concerns about being falsely accused. Our whole legal system is based on conflict. You have to prove someone is guilty. In relation to child protection issues and child abuse, what we need to do is change that. We need to alter the way that we deal with these particular crimes.
The Kilkenny Incest Report has the answer to that. The Kilkenny Incest Report recommended that there should be a mechanism by which a name could be taken off the abuse register. That was the only... I know. There are local abuse registers. That was the only nod in the direction of the Cleveland report. And not one of these experts welcomed that proposal. Nobody here wants to acknowledge Murphy's Law.
Hold on a moment.
Nobody wants to acknowledge that they can make mistakes.
Okay, one voice.
That's the surest guarantee that you will make a mistake.
All right, one voice.
Referring again to abusers, it's well known that the quality work needs to be done with young offenders before their whole sexual pattern is established. and little or no work is being done in this country.
Am I right in thinking that the offender has to opt?
Offending.
The offender has to make the decision that they want to take this rehabilitative training.
And there's almost no treatment available for young under 20s who are now offending, who've begun to go the wrong way.
They're one third of all abusers, you say.
Also older men now.
Hold on
there are also older men now beginning to ring. They're certainly ringing our line, asking for help. They are beginning to become maybe self-motivating, and we have to respond to that.
Clodagh Corcoran, if in 5 years' time you have to write another book, how do you think this one will run?
It will run much more depressingly than the last one, I can tell you, because unless there's a long-term strategy put in place, it has to be put in place by people like us. There's no point in leaving it to the politicians or to the Department of Health or the Department of Education. It's got to go to the top of the political agenda with votes. And people have to be said, before I vote for you, what are you going to do about this?
There has to be a national strategy on child abuse.
A national long-term strategy so that we stop falling from crisis to crisis.
A national strategy on child abuse. That is the consensus from this debate on Davis. Thank you for joining us for the duration of this series. We hope to see you again very soon.